Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcasts. My name's Steve Wiss, and I'm joined, as ever, by my good friend Jonathan Ferdugber. Have you wintered well, my old pal?
Happy 2022, Steve. Happy 2022 to everyone listening. We're back, or I'm back anyway. You were at it last week, so yeah, good to be back now with you, my friend, for another year. How is everything?
Yeah, I'm well. It's certainly with the European competitions back in action now. I was very, very excited by the Celtic Bodø Glimt game. It went far better from a Norwegian perspective than I expected. So really, it was a fantastic result for Glimt there, which we're going to talk about soon. But well and truly looking forward to the rest of the year and season ahead.
Yeah, and obviously on the last show we had a few special guests, didn't we, previewing that Glimt game. On this show today, we're going to move towards Denmark as well with the return of the Superliga. We've got special guests coming up, and also we're joined by Henry, who's back from Football in DK, our good friend. So, but before we do that, let's look at that game that we previewed last week, Steve. You were excited about it. You were quite famous, weren't you? You're a bit of a celebrity. On various YouTube channels, I saw you popping up.
Yeah.
When we got into the meat of the game, how was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where I think anyone who knew anything about Bodø Glimt was kind of in demand last week. But we had a couple of really good guests on. I think it was a surprise that Bodø Glimt won for me 3-1. But it was the same last year when I kind of doubted them against Roma. And once again, they completely turned everything upside down. And I couldn't believe how good they looked in terms of their organisation and physical fitness, considering they've not had a competitive game since December. So
before you analyse the game, could you just give us the score? And
oh well, sorry, yeah, I'm jumping the gun. Those
who aren't aware of it. How did it unfold in terms of score and scorers, etc.?
I'm being very presumptuous here. Yeah, Celtic 1, Bodø Glimt 3. Bodø Glimt took the lead inside the first 7 minutes. Runar Espejord on his debut for the club with an excellent finish, and Amal Pellegrino made it 2-0 in the 55th minute. Celtic kind of knocked on the door a bit from Maeda's header in the 79th, but just a couple of minutes later, Hugo Vesselsen, who had a fantastic game in midfield, he scored a deflected shot to make it 3-1. Away goals don't count now in Europe, which is kind of a shame for Bodø Glimt, but a remarkable 3-1 win at Parkhead against a Celtic side that had only had hardly lost a game of football in its last sort of 25, 26 games.
The crazy thing about this, I think, from my perspective, is that there was a lot of kind of after the Celtic Rangers game, when Celtic battered Rangers in a recent game a few weeks ago, there was kind of a perception that Celtic are kind of like, they're here now, aren't they? They're the new manager and everything. They're going to be a big team, which, to be fair, they're doing. They're doing really well in the league. They've sort of turned things around under Ange Postecoglou. So I guess, do you think that kind of played into the maybe underestimating of Glimt a little bit? Because from what I saw in terms of the reaction, a lot of people were quite shocked by this, weren't they? But I wasn't at all.
Do you know what? I thought Celtic looked tired to me. And we talk about how it really should suit them being in the middle of their season, match sharp, and Bodø Glimt, it's at the start of their campaign, so they're going to be lacking sharpness. But Celtic they just were making tired passes. They were doing things at a side that looked quite fatigued to me. Now, they had that great win against Rangers. I've known it before sometimes with sides that win a really crucial game. They put so much into it. The come down can take about a couple of weeks sometimes, like a hangover almost. I kind of sense that a little bit. I saw they kind of laboured to a late win at the weekend against Dundee. So they were doing things. Bodø Glimt deserve a lot of credit, but Celtic were making basic errors in that game. Just simple passes that were going long, and that kind of they certainly were not as sharp as you would think. But there was a lot of expectation they would win this game. Probably an underestimating Bodø Glimt again, and they pounce. It's very hard to face Bodø Glimt. The first time you face them, they're so much in your face, as Jose Mourinho found out. it can take quite a few matches to get to know them and how to face their system. It's very awkward.
Yeah, and in terms of the tailor the tape, what was the Glimt have got quite a few new players, as we talked about on the last show, as you talked about on the last show, with your guests. How did they fare, and who stood out to you in terms of this new look Glimt?
I think Runar Espejord. I liked what I saw from him up front, and he came off in the 67th minute. And if that's how they're going to use him this season, then great, because we know he has to be wrapped in cotton wool. We know he's an injury dap, but when he is sharp and firing, he's a fantastic striker. And if it means that, one game he's going to be on the bench, the next game he sort of plays for an hour, if he's scoring goals, no one's going to care. But he looked immediately right at home in the team for me. And Bryce Wembangomo, right footer at left back, he was allowed to cut in field. He was basically playing an inverted fullback role. Celtic just let him cut in field on his strong foot, and he was given a lot of freedom. And I've no idea why they didn't just keep him on his weak left foot and box him in. But there seemed to be no strategy against him. He actually had a pretty good debut. He caught the eye, and I know a lot of Celtic fans were very impressed with Wembangomo. But really, midfield, they just dominated. Vettelson was strong as well. Really, the whole team put in a heck of a shift. Even no one had a weak game. Even the goalkeeper, Nikita Haikin, was distributing balls superbly. I guess, Pellegrino always stands out because he scored a goal. His technical flair. But for me, probably Wembangomo, Espejord, and Vettelson, they were the three standout players.
Yeah, in terms of tailor the tape, it was Espejord in the 7th minute, Armand Pellegrino in the 55th minute. Celtic then got one back through Maeda before Vettelson, as you mentioned there, in the 81st minute, made it 3-1. I mean, that's a massive task for Celtic to turn around now, going to Glimt. Do you think they can do it, or how do you expect it to go from here?
Yeah, from now I would expect Bodø Glimt to convert that into progression to the next round. It's going to be really hard for Celtic going up to Aspamira Stadium. Only two teams have won up there in the last 2 years, and one was in the Champions League, Lechia Warsaw. That will give Celtic a comfort, and Molde with the other side. But it's an absolute fortress of a stadium, plastic pitch. It's going to be up north. I've not actually checked the weather forecast, but it's not going to be very warm. That probably won't bother Celtic as much as the pitch will. But really, Celtic have got to improve a lot from last week, and they've got to get to grips with this Bodø Glimt system. They've got to match them for their energy, and they can't put in a tired display again. And I think the manager, Ange Postecoglou, has got to definitely think about some strategies, how to either limit certain players or try and put the pressure on certain players. It's going to be really difficult now for Celtic to turn that around. I still think I actually don't think we can't underestimate Celtic. They clearly are a decent side right now. We saw the Rangers result in Europe against Dortmund. It might be that both them old firm sides right now are kind of feeding off each other a bit. There's a strong title race. I've always said Scottish League is much better when it's a closed battle, and I don't think we can completely underestimate Celtic. But with a 3-1 advantage, you've got to think Chesil Knudsen will come up with a strategy to get them through, hopefully, to the next round now. But as I say, it's a shame away goals don't count.
You are a bit of a, you're not Celtic's biggest fan, are you? So I think you're quite happy about the outcome of that last game. What's your prediction for the game?
Well, I think it'll be a draw. I could see something like a 2-2 draw. I certainly think there'll be goals in this game. Celtic are not going to go down without a fight, but Bodø Glimt clearly have still got goals in them again. And we know, at home they are very, very strong. It's I actually think I would be very, very impressed with Celtic if they came and got a result that enabled them to progress now. I think it would be a heck of an away display at a difficult location. But so I think there'll be goals. I think it's like a 2-2 draw would make sense. At some point, if Celtic are sort of chasing the game, say Celtic are 2-1 up or something, then they have to get another goal. And, there'll be chances for Bodø Glimt on the counter-attack at the other end to score, and they like to do that. So I think it'll be a good game to watch. Draw, a high-scoring draw.
So that means Glimt to go through potentially, which will be a big achievement. Fantastic stuff. I mean, and where can we watch it? When is it on?
Yeah, it's an earlier kickoff this time. I think it's something like 5:45 UK time, and it will be on BT Sport in the UK. I'm not sure about other parts of the world or Europe, but you're an earlier kickoff time in the cold Arctic Circle, and I'm sure there'll be all eyes on it, really.
Great stuff. And I think that's where we'll leave it for Norway today. I think we're going to Denmark's going to be one of our main focuses on the show, isn't it? Is there any other business you wanted to pick up on before we move on to?
Well, I think
Swedish Cup?
We've got to talk a bit about Sweden in terms of the Swedish Cup. It always starts very early, doesn't it, Jonathan? Up there, I must say. I don't know how some of these sides get away with it, really, with the temperatures. But the first round of group matches has taken place. There's 8 groups. The top team in each group goes through to the quarterfinals. So, were there any particular results in this round that caught your eye?
Do you know what? Not really. I can't believe it's already Swedish Cup time. By the way, I have to say, it feels like December end of the season was like yesterday. To be honest, I can't believe it's mid-Feb already. But yeah, Swedish Cup is always the sort of curtain raiser towards the season. There's still a month, 6 weeks till the season begins in Allsvenskan. But of course, the cup is kind of the pre-season prelude. At this stage, the group stages of the cup. In terms of the results, there wasn't anything that's particularly massively caught my eye. I think in later weeks to come, we'll look at sort of transfers and things like that, which is, we're going to ask sort of Henry to name some game-changing transfers, and I think we'll do similar things in the weeks to come in Sweden and Norway. But, if I read through some of the results, obviously Saturday we had AIK beat Glimt 2-0. Elfsborg beat GIF Sundsvall, newly promoted GIF Sundsvall 3-2. Skellebo SK lost 6-1 to Degerfors, so that's a big win for Degerfors. Varberg Boys beat Sollentuna. Norrköping drawing 1-1 with Osters. That was a bit of maybe a disappointment for Norrköping there. And then some other results as well to keep an eye on that happened. Malmö beat Gais 5-1, which is pretty much to be expected. Värnamo newly promoted. We'll be talking about them a lot this season. They won 2-1 at Ängelholms. Örebro 0-0 with Eskilstuna, which was a bit of a shock result for Örebro. Obviously, they've been relegated. Jytte Hogdal 0, Häcken 13. An incredible score like there. 13. One is one of those ones where you've got brackets 1-3. And Benny Traore hat-trick, by the way. Gustav Bergon got 2. It will take me about half an hour to read all the goal scores. A few new players as well popping up with goals. But Jytte Hogdal, they're quite a low-ranking side, to be honest. They've done well to get to the group stages. They have a lot of English players, by the way. They have like an exchange program where they bring players from England quite often. They have like a sort of program for released players in England to come over. So they do tend to have a lot of English players in their side. But yeah, they've taken a pasting there. Hammarby 2, Falkenberg 1. Sylvia 0, Sirius 3. Kalmar 2, Trelleborg 1. IFK beat Landskrona Boys 2-0. Mjällby Norrby 0-0. So Mjällby getting the clean sheets again, as always. And then in today's games, I caught a little bit of Djurgården against Braga. They won 1-0. And Victor Edvardsson, a big new signing, obviously came from Degerfors. Djurgården have won the race to sign him. And he's got his sort of one of his first official goals. So that's about it. There's nothing, the group stage is some teams sort of play, they experiment. They don't necessarily play their full strength team at this stage. It's kind of experimenting depending on the strength of the opponent. But, it's always good to get through to the latter stage and then maybe look once the season starts to get to the final. But yeah, that was about it. So nothing really major caught my eye there. As you can see, not too many upsets.
I didn't realise they played cricket in Sweden. That's a cricket score, isn't it? I'm just looking at this. It's Hogdals, and the qualification for this round actually takes place back in the summer, I do believe, from last year, and they did well to get to this stage. Like you said, they beat a side called Vasselens, who did they get a promotion or something? I can't remember last season, but back in August, that was a very good win for them. But to lose 13-0 at home, it's disappointing, isn't it? Let's just say the least. And Swedish Cup, that is ongoing for the next few weeks. I like that idea. How the cup happens before the league gets teams up to sharpness. We actually got Norwegian Cup coming up very soon as well. In just a bit of a one-off this year due to the schedule in I think mid-March. So
Yeah.
and there's also, of course, the old Finnish Cup has to get a mention every now and then as well, Jonathan. So it's very much cup.
Have you been watching any of it?
No, I need to check up on my on the old Suomi Cup. Is it? I forget how they say it now. But I think it's been ongoing. So, in fact, actually, quite a few matches have been going on. I mean, a lot of these games are played indoors in Finland, of course. That's how they get these matches done early in the season. But Honka are top of their group at the moment, HJK and SJK as well. So, yes, in terms of the rest of this episode, we've got a big interview coming up next with Jordan Gardner. Henry in Denmark is interviewing him. And then after that, we were also talking big Superliga transfers and stuff with Henry. So, yeah, for the rest of this episode, we're very much into that Danish zone, Jonathan.
We certainly are. And let's get into it, I guess. I'm looking forward to the interview. And I guess we're back now for 2022. We'll have more episodes to come. So it's a little introduction from us. But yeah, Cup, Swedish Cup, obviously Conference League. There's a lot going on at the moment. But one of the main talking points in our region at the moment is the return of the Superliga after the long break. So let's take it away with this interview.
Okay, I'm delighted to be joined on the Nordic Football Pod today by Jordan Gardner, owner and chairman of FC Helsingør, who are going great guns in the Danish First Division at the moment. Jordan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really, really great to be able to get insight from an owner of a club. I guess one of the questions that has sort of been burning through my mind is, can you talk us through how did you land on Helsingør and on Denmark in general, and were there other sort of countries or clubs you were considering, because this isn't your first investment in a football club?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, the landscape has changed. It'll be 3 years next month that we've been in Denmark, and I think there's been a lot of interest from foreign investment, from Americans coming to Denmark, certainly since we've been there. I had just mutual connections in European football who were starting to look at markets kind of outside the big five. And Denmark kind of popped up as a market where, the quality of football was very high. The national team was starting to do well. It was a little bit of an easier place to do business because, everyone speaks English for the most part in Denmark. And so I visited Denmark. This must have been in the fall of 2018, and I really enjoyed my time there. I went to a lot of different games, met with a lot of different clubs, and so kind of started my journey down, Danish football. And we did look at a couple different clubs at that time. We looked at a club that was in the Superliga. We looked at 2 different clubs in the first division. And the reason we landed on Helsingør, I've talked about this publicly, is, it's a relatively new club, but it has a good history. It's been in the Superliga, was in the Superliga 4 years ago. Had a new stadium coming, which opened in the summer of 2019. And, it's a club geographically that's close to Copenhagen, which makes things a lot easier from an investment perspective and a player recruitment perspective. And so kind of checked a lot of boxes for us. I think the other clubs we looked at also had pros and cons. We looked at some clubs out in Jutland, which I think we can certainly talk about. I think there's positives of owning a club out there and downsides. But ultimately, we've been very happy with the choice. It's worked out for us for a variety of reasons. And things are going well.
And I mean, I've never bought a club myself, but I'd imagine it's a bit like buying a secondhand car where you only really know the real picture of what's under the hood once you've paid your money. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much due diligence you can do ahead of time, especially when you're buying a club that's not particularly professional. So, when we bought FC Helsingør, it was owned by a forening, which is like an association, like a nonprofit organization. And it was not the most professionally run business. And so, yes, I think there was a lot of things that kind of came out of the woodwork after we bought the club that were definitely things that we didn't know about. But that is how it goes when you're doing a M&A transaction in probably any business. You do as much homework ahead of time as you possibly can and try to understand what you're getting yourself into. But ultimately, there's only so much you can do. The challenge we had was the club was really on a downward trajectory when we bought it. It was it was just about to get relegated for the second time. And so having this be the first project, I had made other investments in European football, but much smaller. And this being the first controlling interest of a club and kind of jumping into a club that really wasn't a free fall was not a fun experience. But ultimately, it worked out for us. And, certainly doing, going into the future and understanding what it takes to be successful in European football. I think going through that experience was a net positive for us.
Are you able to talk about like what the biggest surprise was that you found?
I mean, the biggest surprise for me was just the lack of professionalism, I think, at the club. And this doesn't go for our club at that time, but, across European football, whether it's the way, clubs hire people or recruit players or the day-to-day management of clubs, so many of these clubs are not professional. And I kind of just shake my head at the way they're run. I think that is a net positive for groups like ours who try to do things a little bit differently. And, we're not the highest spending team in the world. Certainly we're one of the lowest spending teams, and we're able to do things a little bit more efficiently. And it just, you look at the landscape, whether you say this player was signed for this amount of money or this club was bought in this country. I think going from a macro level in the industry all the way down to this individual club, that was really surprising to me. You just kind of assume, or I assumed on the outside looking in, all these clubs are run well. You watch the games on television and the stadiums are full and everything looks good. And kind of behind the curtains, most of these clubs are not run particularly well.
Yeah, I can certainly attest to that. What does almost like the 5 or the 10-year plan look like for you? Like this isn't going to be an investment you're holding in 50 years time, for example. So like what are you trying to achieve with it, and where do you kind of see an exit point?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of ahead of plans. Honestly, our first goal was to stabilize the club, get the club back up to the first division, which we did quite quickly. The next goal was to kind of aim towards a promotion push to the Superliga within probably 3 to 4 years, and we've done that in one season. So, I think looking forward, it's hard to know what the future looks like. For us, it's obviously in the short term get to the Superliga. Can we stabilize? Can we replicate maybe what a club like Silkeborg or Viborg has done this year, where they've come up from the first division and they're both mid to upper table teams right now? Beyond that, it's really hard to tell. I don't, being realistic, Helsingør is not a huge club. It's not going to compete with Brøndby and Copenhagen. That's just not realistic. So I think it's just doing the best we can. We have a lot of good, young, talented players. And so I think really kind of focusing on our player sales model, which is something we've talked about for a long time, I think will be a key for us in the next 3 to 5 years. So I think a combination of stability in the Superliga and really churning out some good player sales is probably the best case scenario for us.
Yeah, and I have to say the last couple of transfer windows have seen transfer values, rocket in terms of exits from the Superliga. We've seen like several transfers north of 10 million. So I think outside of Denmark, there's a sort of growing recognition of the quality of the league and the players that are developed there. Yeah,
and it's not even just that. I think it's a lot of people look at a lot of countries and players move abroad quite a bit, but the players from Denmark moving abroad now are actually having a lot of success in a lot of leagues. You see players moving to Germany, to Holland, to all these leagues. So I think absolutely for us, it's can we move these players abroad, particularly from the Superliga? We've had opportunities to move players abroad from where we're at currently, but it's more to other Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway. And for us, it makes more sense to hang on to the players, stabilize ourselves in the Superliga and then move them on to bigger leagues. So I think absolutely, to your point, reputationally, Danish football and Danish footballers are becoming more and more valuable. And I think that's only going to grow, hopefully, after the national team continues to do well, coming up with the World Cup and the Superliga continues to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Silkeborg and Viborg, because I was gonna ask you about those, because both of them are, I guess they're both in the mix for being in the championship group when the league splits in 4 games time, and both of them have really not entered into the transfer market that heavily. There's still quite a lot of squad cohesion. Is that something that kind of gives you cause for optimism?
Absolutely. I think Silkeborg in particular, they play a very similar style to we do. They have a stadium where the surface is artificial. They play very like a high pressing ball possession style, which is very similar to ours. I think we played those two teams I think 4 times last year in the first division, and while they both finished ahead of us on the table, I think we were quite competitive. So yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about the continuity of those rosters, you're right. They've made minimal moves in terms of spending big bucks in the transfer market. I think that's been our success point in terms of keeping a cohesive roster together for the last 2.5 years. That doesn't mean immediately tomorrow, if we're in the Superliga, it's not going to be difficult. But I think the good news that we have, and I think you've seen that with the 2 clubs you mentioned, is the players are growing with the squad. So you're seeing a good young talent base of players who are very, very good first division players who are growing into becoming very, very good Superliga players. And I think that's a model that we can replicate, hopefully.
How do you manage that, with successive promotions, or I guess potential promotion? How do you manage that sort of squad cohesion and the personalities and the relationships that are being forged with the sort of step up in skill level as you progress?
Yeah, I think first off, I think it starts of having a really good culture in the locker room. And I think our sporting side, led by our manager, Morten Eskesen, he's built fantastic culture. So it's not a situation where I think a lot of clubs, they treat players like expendable assets. And it's the case where, okay, we just got promoted, you're not good enough, we're going to throw you to the curb and we're going to go find someone else. Well, yeah, I mean, we might have players that we don't today evaluate as Superliga level players, but instead of just getting rid of them and trying to buy someone else in the transfer market, why don't we find a way to get those players we have currently to be better, to improve, to fit in our system to a point where we can use them and get the most out of them in a higher level. So I think it's definitely built on culture. I mean, Kent Nielsen, who's the manager at Celtic Park, I think he's done a fantastic job with this. It's about elevating those current players you have to playing at the higher level and not necessarily just assuming you can fix everything just going out in the transfer market. That's not to say every window we haven't improved and made strategic signings in the transfer market, but for us, we don't pay large transfer fees. We basically don't pay transfer fees. So we have to find players out of contract, players who are dissatisfied with their current clubs. And so we can't necessarily rely on just filling a whole new roster of players from the transfer market. So we have to focus on the current roster we have. And to the credit of our squad and our organization, we've done quite a good job at
that. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the real strengths of the current squad is that it's still got a very strong Danish presence. That there's it feels very much like it's still adhering to the kind of the culture of the club before you bought it in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this publicly a lot. We had a focus coming into FC Helsingør to bring in a lot of foreign players, bring in American players in particular. And for the first, I would say, 3 to 6 months, we brought in a lot of foreign players, and we realized it didn't work. The level of the players just wasn't high enough. They didn't understand the league and the culture. And so we transitioned very quickly to having a roster that's a majority of domestic players. And I think that's been a big key to our success. Our coach is Danish, our sporting director is Danish. Most of our players are Danish, and even our foreign players, we have a couple kids from New Zealand. They've been in Denmark for 3 years now. So they've learned the language. They've integrated quite well. So it's not to say that you can't take a different approach and have success, but I find it very difficult to believe. You look at Vejle in the Superliga, you look at Jammerbug as a team in our division who's just stocked full of 85% foreign players, and those clubs they're just really struggling. To bring in a bunch of foreign players, you have to really know what you're doing. I think FC Michelin has quite a few Brazilians, but they spend a lot of time and energy and money on making sure those Brazilians integrate into the squad, into the footballing culture quite well. So I think for us, it was kind of somewhat by necessity. When we got relegated right after we bought the club down to the second division, we felt it was really important to bring in staff and players who had been in the lower divisions of Danish football before and who knew what it took to be successful to get out of those divisions. And obviously it was very, very difficult to get out. We were in the second division for one season when it was the 1 year where only one club got promoted out of 24. And so putting aside the challenges of in any league getting promoted, just 1 out of 24 is a really difficult challenge. And so I think we've taken the momentum out of a mostly domestic roster in the second division and just kind of built on that. And we don't like by necessity in each window say we're only going to recruit Danish players. But for us, if we're going to bring in a foreign player, that player has to be significantly better than a domestic player that we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. What were the sort of biggest cultural differences you found sort of in Denmark compared to America?
I mean, Denmark's a socialist country. I think running a business in a country like Denmark is very, very different from the United States. I think that definitely took an adjustment period for us. I think, the footballing culture, I had been involved in European football before, so that wasn't too much of a shock, but obviously the sporting culture in North America versus Scandinavia is very different, whether it's things like promotion and relegation, the domestic player transfer market, the kind of the mentality of the Danish player. I think that's all taken an adjustment period for us. But I mean, the good news is I spent quite a bit of time in Denmark. It's been 3 years now. So I don't want to say we have it all figured out, but I think we've found a way to kind of merge our American way of thinking while trying to be as respectful as possible to Danish culture. And certainly it's two sides of a coin, right? It's running a business in a foreign country, which is, the stuff behind the scenes, but it's also the footballing culture in that country. And, what's the style of plays that work? What kind of players are successful in Denmark? What kind of players can adjust to things like the weather in the winter and, the way things are in that country. And I think it took some time, but we've been able to crack that.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much of your you feel like a very involved owner at the moment, and a very sort of visible presence. Do you see that sort of being the case going forward, or can you see yourself kind of taking a back seat as things bed in over time, and the sort of the processes and the things that you put in place start to sort of run themselves?
I mean, I think the good news is probably after the first year was really kind of triage in terms of putting a lot of fires out and making sure all the bills were getting paid, and things were really, things were not great with the club for the first year. But since then, it's been much more about culture building in terms of me being hands-on. I think, I do think on one hand, absentee ownership just doesn't work in European football. I think Americans that buy clubs and never show their faces, or no one knows who they are or what they're about, that's really challenging. And I haven't seen a model in that sense that has worked. But on the other side, I think it's also important that you hire people that are really good at what they do, whether that's a sporting director or CEO or coach, and you don't want to micromanage them. I think the clubs that the owners are too hands-on can be problematic as well. So for me, I really try to kind of weave that balance. I personally think it's really important to have close coordination between the day-to-day business of the club and the board level. And that's why I spend a lot of time. But for me, when I'm over in Denmark now, because the club's in a really good place, it's spending time with the coaching staff. It's, taking our manager and our sporting director out to dinner. It's, getting to know the players a little bit more, making sure our staff is things are going well with our staff. It's much more about culture building than anything else. And I think it's like running any other business. If you're an employee in a business, you want to know where this business is going and who you're working for and why you're working for it, where we're all going. And so I think that's been really important to our staff. It's a little bit of an intangible thing in terms of me just being there, but I think having someone to, from an ownership perspective, being there and showing that they care and being active on social media, I think, I interact with some of the players occasionally, just being like, hey, I saw you scored 3 goals in that game. That's fantastic. Really, really great to see that. Nothing invasive, but something that they know that they're supported, and the ownership group is watching and is really interested in what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I as an Arsenal fan, that's music to my ears, because I know a thing or two about absentee owners.
Yeah, I mean, you bring it up Arsenal, and obviously the scale of some clubs is much, much bigger than what we're doing in Denmark. But, I can definitely relate to people that get frustrated by ownership that, I don't know whether they're necessarily just absentee, which is part of it. But, for me, my philosophy with ownership at a football club, whether that's when I'm talking to the fans or our staff or anyone else, is look, I want to be very upfront and transparent about the decisions we're making, whether you might not agree with the decisions we make, but at least you can respect them, and I'll be open and honest and accessible to answer your questions. And as long as you respect that we own the club at the end of the day and we're going to make decisions that we think are best, I think a lot of times ownership groups in European football, they hide and they're just not accessible. And then decisions come down and no one knows what the hell's going on. And I think that's just really problematic and frustrating for everyone involved.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I wanted to ask, and I know it's jumping the gun a bit perhaps, but if you do reach the Superliga, what will change? Can you sort of break down what it will mean economically and from a sporting perspective if you do make it?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to obviously think about that. Knock on wood. You always have to contingency plan in European football in terms of, if we do go up, this is what that would look like. If we don't go up, this is what it'll look like. Honestly, we don't want to change a lot. I mean, I think, of course, our organization will build up a little bit. We'll have to add a little bit of staff. I think, of course, we'll be looking to add 1 or 2 or 3 players in the summer transfer window. But beyond that, I think, again, like I said earlier, I think the success we have had over the last couple of years has been the continuity of the organization. And I think we want to keep that up through the Superliga. There's no incentive for us to blow up our budgets or spend a lot of money or do anything crazy, because that just hasn't worked for us. So I don't honestly see a lot changing for us in the Superliga. Of course, the revenues go up quite significantly, whether it's television or game day or sponsorship. So that certainly will help the health of the organization. But for us, it's continuing to run a professional and a stable business and being smart about the way we make decisions. So I don't see a ton changing, to be honest.
And if you do make it sort of ahead of plan, does the ambition shift to trying to sort of get a place in one of the European competitions?
I don't think that's realistic for us in the short term. I mean, of course, that would be fantastic and amazing, but I think the financial resources of the teams in the top 4 to 5 to 6 in the Superliga are exorbitant compared to the financial resources that we put into the club. So I don't think that's realistic. I think for us, it would just be stabilizing ourselves. And, can we, with one of the lowest budgets in the Superliga, be a competitive club to finish top 6? Can we just stay up? I think those are all realistic goals for us. I mean, we're in the bottom third of player spending right now in the first division. If we kind of keep that model together and do something similar in the Superliga, it'll be a challenge for us to stay up, but I think it's doable and realistic. So I think it's all just for us about being realistic. And, honestly, every time I set a goal for our club, our first goal was stabilize in the first division. Then we finished in 4th place in the promotion group. This year, the goal was to maybe realistically be competitive for promotion at some point while we're in first place going into the winter break. So I think every time I set a goal, we kind of exceed that. So you never know what the future holds.
Great. Must be exciting.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about the things that you've brought to Helsingør in terms of like optimization on and off the pitch and things like the P-motion injury prevention platform and stuff like that. But I wondered, do you have any thoughts for how the league as a whole could improve to get more attention outside of Denmark?
Yeah, that's a good question. I look at the Superliga in particular and I say there's clubs up there, without naming them, maybe outside the top 3, that you say these are big clubs that can and should be doing a lot better with the resources they have. I think that Danish clubs, for the most part, do quite a good job of developing and selling players. So I don't think that's the issue. But you see some clubs, I mean, maybe Odense, Aalborg, these kind of clubs, and AGF, these are big clubs. And you kind of look at the recruitment strategies and you look at the results and you say, wow, I mean, they're spending X amount of money and they're finishing 8th in the Superliga. They should be a lot better than that. So I think the depth of the Superliga can be better in terms of outside Brøndby, Copenhagen, and Midtjylland. I think you can see, you see what Randers is doing on a relatively low wage structure. I think it's really impressive what they're doing. I mean, Aalborg is having a good season, but there are definitely perennial large clubs that I think can be doing a better job, without knowing the internal workings of that. I think that more comes down to just player recruitment, professionalization, the way these businesses are run. I think beyond that, I mean, I think the league's in quite a good shape. I think now that COVID is starting to kind of hopefully be in the rearview mirror, you see crowds coming back, you see the excitement of the league. So I think things are in a good place generally, but I just think there are certain clubs that could be doing a better job.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about crowds, because I think that it makes such a big difference to the product, if we call it that. But whenever I'm sort of doing the rounds, trying to encourage people I know to watch the league, it helps so much if there's an atmosphere and the choreography and flares and stuff like that. It's unbelievable how much it kind of affects the enjoyment just from watching on TV.
I'll tell you what I think is actually really interesting is the Superliga is now picked up on a streaming site called 11 Sports. They have the domestic right or the international rights to the Superliga here in the US. And I've been watching it a lot recently, including today I watched the Viborg game, and they don't pick up on the audio feed from Denmark, I guess, because they figured people can't speak Danish, so they're not going to listen to the audio. So all it is the internal crowd noise of the games, all of them. And I think actually I found that really interesting, especially, watching FC Copenhagen yesterday. I think there were 25,000 fans at that game. You're kind of just feeling that atmosphere on the live stream. I think is something that's really interesting to an international audience. We've talked to the division who runs the leagues about the first division, and there's no international streaming or no international rights whatsoever for the first division, which of course is a bit frustrating for us because we do have supporters internationally, both in the US and then in places like New Zealand where we have some players. So, I hope hopefully over the coming years the league can start thinking a little bit more big picture about getting the rights out there more globally. I think there's yeah, let's be honest, the bottom of the first division isn't super exciting to watch, but there's definitely matches when we're playing Lyngby, when it's, Horsens against Fredericia. Like, these are good games. These are, especially because there's only 12 teams in the Superliga, you go to the top of the first division. I'd like to see those games more accessible to international audience if possible.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that the Superliga international rights are packaged up with 7 or 8 other leagues. And so in order to get it, you have to buy all of them. And so I think that's why there was a bit of a struggle for there to be coverage. So I'm very grateful that there's some coverage now, but I've just hope that it continues.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you see that there being a potential to sort of build an international fan base for Helsingør, or albeit not on the scale of the big four, but can you see people in America starting to get interested with it on TV if you make it into the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're a sustainable Superliga team over a period of years and the games are accessible to watch, I mean, what's challenging a bit is the time difference. Luckily, I don't know how it's going to work, how it would work in the Superliga with the television deal, but in the first division, we're able to play our home games on Friday nights in Denmark, which is in the morning, and in the US, which is accessible. But we have games that are at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? 4 o'clock in the morning out in California. So that can be difficult. But I don't think it's impossible. I think, if we were to bring in American players at a national team level, that certainly would create a lot of buzz and excitement. I think, again, we have 2 players out of New Zealand on their national team, so I think that could be a possibility. We have a kid from Syria who's on their national team. So I think it's, from an international audience, it's more about what's the hook. Are there players that are interesting to an international audience? I don't necessarily think an American audience is just randomly going to get excited about FC Helsingør unless they know me personally or follow me on social media and like what we're doing, which is certainly possible. But yeah, I think we'll get a better sense next year. Hopefully, knock on wood, we're in the Superliga and the games are more accessible on streaming.
Brilliant, awesome. Well, yeah, I'm watching very closely to see whether you make it, and I've been very encouraged by what you've been putting together this season. So yeah, hopefully this time next year we can be talking again as a Superliga owner.
Yeah, knock on wood. I mean, for us, it's just, I don't want to say it's all icing on the cake, but for us, 2 promotions in 3 years in whatever league and whatever level it is would just be a remarkable accomplishment. I think being able to play at Parken, being able to play at Brøndby Stadium, I think would be incredibly exciting for our organization and our players and our staff. And so, yeah, hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be there and happy to chat anytime.
Brilliant. And I guess just finally, I get people reaching out to me from time to time asking who they should support in Denmark. What would be your sales pitch to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we play a very, very attractive style of football, high press, high possession. We have a lot of good young players, several of whom will hopefully be in the World Cup come the winter. So I think, I can't compare it to Copenhagen or Brøndby or kind of that level. But if you're looking outside the top tier of teams in Denmark, we're definitely kind of the scrappy underdog, doing things a little bit smarter, a little bit more efficiently. And I think that's attractive to a lot of people.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Jordan. We really, really appreciate it and wish you the best of luck for the rest of the season. Hopefully your boys can get the job done.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great interview. That was Jordan Gardner on the Nordic Football Podcast. Thank you very much for your time. And Henry, I think that went rather well. He comes across superbly. Yeah,
really, really interesting guy. Really interesting model that he's got going on there. And, I wish them all the best of luck for the rest of the season. I think it'd be great to see them in the Superliga and see if they can continue their sort of upwards trajectory.
Yeah, we're going to continue with Superliga now, and welcome back Jonathan as well to this section. It's because we're in a weird position compared to the other Nordic leagues. This league runs more conventional for most European seasons. Right in the middle of the campaign, basically, Henry, I think we just had the first round back after of 2022, and there's been some significant transfers in the winter. We're going to talk about transfers here, and basically ones which have caught your eye. And there's only one place to start, because recently some massive news came through that Jack Wilshere is going to Denmark. I mean, what was your initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess firstly surprised that there'd not even been any rumors about it, and then there he was in an AGF shirt. So yeah, I guess surprised, but Also as an Arsenal fan, I was extremely excited to see him come to the Superliga and test himself there. I think it will bring some eyeballs from the UK as well, and come for Jack Wilshere, stay for the extremely exciting football. I'm just really excited to see how it pans out. I think he obviously hasn't played competitive football for a little while, but when he's at his best, he's a phenomenal talent. He's still only 30. I think we sort of think of him as older than that because he broke through at 16 years old. But still only 30, lots to offer. And I think that his sort of very tenacious, quite aggressive style and technique suits the sort of football AGF play really well. And he's got some very talented players to gel with. So, yeah. Super excited to see how that pans out. I think he's supposed to be making his debut on Friday.
Henry, I mean, this is, you've been commenting and sort of tweeting about the transfers throughout the last, few months or a few weeks without the Superliga. Would you say that this kind of blew you out of the water? Would it say, I guess that ranks as your number one, but how eye-catching was it for you to see that compared to the other transfers you've seen, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a general feeling that this has been one of the craziest transfer windows that the Super League has ever seen in terms of incomings and outgoings. And just, we're going to talk about some of the names, but just throwing it out there, Wagner Love, for example. Who would have thought this guy would be ending up in the Super League? I mean, we just got some real throwback names, some unexpected transfers. There was, twists and turns. So I should have known better than to think that it was all over once the window shut, because out of nowhere came free agent Jack Wilshere. So
that definitely raises the profile of the league, like you said. Looking at the table at the moment, you've got FC Copenhagen top, Midtjylland second, 1 point between them, Brøndby 3 points behind as well, just on 33 points. So it's an exciting title race as well, to be fair.
Yes. It's incredibly close, throughout the league, I guess. I think specifically for AGF, there's the looming league split that happens in 4 games' time, where the league splits into the championship group, which is the top 6, and then the relegation group, which is the bottom 6. But I think what's interesting is that the top team from the relegation group play a playoff at the end of the season with the 4th place team from the championship group. And so there's a chance that we'll be seeing Jack Wilshere potentially in Europe next season if AGF remain in that relegation group, but go on and win it and win the playoffs. So yeah, lots of ifs and buts, but it's an extremely exciting sort of final third of the season set up.
Yeah, incredible stuff. So without further ado, Henry, let's move on to your sort of other top transfers of this window. Who's on your list? And we ask on this for this episode just to sort of have a variation, so hopefully no more than one from each club. So I guess you've got one already there for one team, but who else has sort of caught your eye? It's been a crazy few months in Denmark, isn't it? I've been sort of following your tweets, and it seems like every few weeks there's an exciting player coming in, as you've just mentioned there. So who would you say is your, I guess the aim of this with Denmark League coming back is to maybe pick ones that could maybe turn the title race, or players who have left that might, change the course of the title race or relegation. So from that point of view, what are the important transfers that you've picked out that you think could maybe change the course of the season?
Yeah, I've got well, aside from Jack Wilshere, I've got 5 incoming transfers. I think that we should also talk a little bit about some of the outgoings, because I think that there's been some pretty significant ones there. But I think that the 5 that I'm going to pick out are starting with Max Meyer at FC Midtjylland, and you'll be familiar with the name. He had a very big reputation when he went from Schalke to Crystal Palace. He's played several times for the German national team, scored for the German national team. So this is an extremely high-profile player. And at 26 years old, he's right in his sort of peak years. So I think there was a feeling when he went to Palace that never quite reached the level they were expecting. I think his sort of technical ability requires a bit of a bulldozer next to him to sort of give him that protection and win the ball. But I think the potential ceiling that he has is massive. And I think that with Evander perhaps moving on in the summer from Midtjylland, I think that Maya could be a sort of ready-made replacement. So it's going to be really interesting to see if he can deliver on that potential. And Midtjylland are very much in the title race at the moment. They only dropped into second this last weekend, and I think that sort of attacking midfield position is really key for them. So he's one of my ones to watch.
He's on loan from Fenerbahce, I do believe, and I'm just looking back at him now. When he joined Palace, he had a market value of 16 million, and that's now dropped to below 1 million. So it's been a fair fall for him. But I guess for this league, if he brings back his good form, then it'll be a massive weapon.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Victor Fischer, who obviously started off, had a huge profile at Ajax, made a move to, I think it was Middlesbrough in the Premier League, and it didn't work out. And he sort of came back to the Superliga with FC Copenhagen to sort of rebuild his profile. It feels a little bit like that sort of move for him, where he needs to show what he can do in a big European league.
Henry, why do you think that? Because Max Meyer, I remember, on Just Football many years ago, he was one of our sort of 10 to watch in the future years, a young talent when he was at Schalke, wasn't it? I think, and he's also been at Palace as well. Why do you think that these sort of players are? Wilshire's quite a similar profile, really, isn't he? It's sort of like, you could almost say he's the German Wilshere in a way. In terms of the style of play, isn't it? Sort of a technical midfielder. Why do you think these sort of players are gravitating towards Denmark? Is there any theory you have on that?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I think Midtjylland have a reputation as a very well-run, very well-coached team where it's almost a rising tide. That there aren't many players there who don't improve as a result of their time there. So I think that it's a very attractive team from that perspective. Very modern sort of coaches, very progressive style of football, and obviously as one of the sort of perennial top two clubs in the Superliga, they can offer regular European football. So I think that as a destination, Midtjylland makes a lot of sense, and I think the league as a whole, the quality is on the up. You heard from Jordan Gardner. Just the even the sort of 7th, 8th place teams in the Superliga now have real spending power, real sort of quality in the squads that I can see the attraction.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. So Max Meyer, we've got Jack Wilshere. Who would you say is next on your list of maybe game-changing transfers? Yeah,
I mean, you said only one per team. That I couldn't decide between the signings for FC Copenhagen, who made a ton of signings. It was really like a splurge in the market. So I've gone for two. Forgive me. First is Kuma Babakar, who you may remember coming through as a sort of prodigy at Fiorentina, and amazingly, this is only his 3rd permanent move. He's done a load of loans over the years. He had a permanent move to Sassuolo, but this is a permanent move for him. And he scored on his debut, looked really, really dangerous. And I think that he's going to be the first choice striker for FC Copenhagen going forward, and brings that sort of that threat from the centre forward position that obviously has been missing since Jonas Wind departed. The other player for FC Copenhagen, who you will know a lot more than me, is Akinkunmi Amu, who joined from Hammarby as one of a number of exciting wing additions. But from everything I've read about him, he's the one to be probably most excited about.
Yeah, Amu's a really good player. One that I think we both had in our fantasy team, didn't we, last season, Steve? At various points in the campaign. Very technical Nigerian player. Kind of, I remember describing him earlier in the start of his career at Hammarby as kind of Messi-esque in the way he dribbles, a very dynamic dribbler. Obviously, it's a bit kind of stereotypical to sort of just bring in Messi, but he does have that like low center of gravity, left-footed, really good runner on the ball, can jink past the man. I think he's a little bit. There are areas of his game that can improve. So although I was surprised to see him move to Denmark rather than say maybe perhaps a bigger league outside the region, which was a lot of rumours that maybe Ajax and teams like that wanted him. I do actually think this is quite a good move for him because it's a slightly higher level, but he gets to still continue to maybe iron out those areas of his game that kind of need improvement. I think, for example, his choice of passing at times and also when to dribble. Sometimes he's not as good going down one side as the other, if that makes sense. So I think there are certain areas of his game that he can work on, and so I think this is a good move. Yeah, in terms of the title race, I think it could be a massive signing. I mean, there's a lot of hype about a young player called Rooney Bardi, isn't there, Henry? And how do you think the two of them will dovetail?
Yeah, I think I mean he's been phenomenal in the few games he's played so far, Rooney. But I think we have to be cognizant of the fact he's still only 16, and I think that it's natural for a player of that age is not going to be able to sort of play the number of games and keep that level of consistency probably, and sort of handle that level of pressure for a sustained period. So I think that although he's been brilliant, I don't want to put too much pressure on the guy, and I think that's why since Mohamed Daramy left, there's been a sort of noticeable lack of threat from the left wing position, and so I think that the reinforcements in the sort of both wing areas really are going to help support the development of Rooney and give that additional threat. So I think that I can see him playing a big role in the title race.
This Kuma Babacar has had more loans than Barclays Bank, hasn't he? Just looking back at his career, goodness me. I just want to make a point actually about the league itself in terms of ins and outs. Total transfer expenses this window is an estimated 12.5 million euros, and it's the actual money coming into the league in terms of departures near over 16 million. So it seems like it's more of a selling league at the moment. Still, this one there's certainly been some significant big money departures. I would actually personally like to ask you about one of them in particular, Henry, and that is Jens Kajust. I'm not actually sure the pronunciation there. From Midtjylland to Stade Reims in France, £9 million transfer. This deal. What do you make of him?
Yeah, he was one of the ones to watch that we talked about over the summer. My infamous ones to watch list that has slowly been gutted as the season goes on. But there was some talk around him moving last summer. That the move never really materialized. And he hasn't played a lot this season. I don't know if that's a result of the potential transfer. I don't know if it was to do with injury, but for whatever reason, he hasn't played much this season. But his talent last season was pretty obvious to everyone. I know that Jonathan has seen a fair amount of him as well. He's just very mature on the ball, great eye for a pass, very good close control. Just seems a very mature player for his age, and I can totally see why he was able to get a move to one of the big five leagues. 9 million euros. I mean, for a player who hasn't played much this season, I think some people were thinking that's perhaps a bit rich, given take Brøndby's Jesper Lindstrøm, for example, who went to Frankfurt for about 6.5 million euros in the summer, and I think that feels like a very low fee for a player who's producing in the Bundesliga. So I think in time, if Kajust delivers on his potential, 9 million euros is going to look like pennies. That they'll get 2 or 3 times that. But in terms of the Superliga, it is a reasonable fee.
How badly is it going to affect Midtjylland losing him?
I don't think too much. As I said, he hasn't played that much this season, and they have a very strong midfield as it goes. So I think they'll manage on. They've shown to have a very strong recruitment so far, and if they can make something out of Max Meyer, I think that will be money in the bank.
Let's move on to your next pick then, Henry. So we've got Kuma Babacar, Kunkumi Amu, we've got Max Meyer, we've got Jack Wilshere. Who else is on your list?
Yeah, I thought I'd bring in a couple more defensive-minded transfers to look out for. I know it's probably more eye catching to pick attacking players, but I've gone for someone from the Norwegian league actually, a guy who has I believe dual nationality, New Zealand and England, defensive midfielder called Joe Bell, who signed for Brøndby, and he replaces the outgoing Morten Frendrup, who left for I think it was about 4 million euros to Genoa, and sort of slots in straight away alongside Slimane and Radicevic in that midfield. He looks a really interesting prospect. He's got this sort of like shaggy hair, sort of throwback look, and is just a really engaging player. And I know that certainly across Twitter, lots of Brøndby fans were saying, you know, this is the signing of the window. So he's certainly one to look out for. I know Steve probably has seen him play a lot more 90 minutes than I have.
Yeah, disappointed to see him go from Norway. I mean, I expected he would leave. I think what really deflates me is that they've signed him for actually less than £1 million, according to Transfermarkt anyway. And I think that's pretty much validated by the clubs at the time. I thought he would go for at least 3 million, if not more. But I mean, they've got an absolute snip here of Brøndby. They really have a fantastic midfielder who can do pretty much anything, any sort of role in the middle of the park there. And he's still a young lad at 22, and he'll develop. It's a good move for the player, I think. It's moving to the Superliga, and obviously a good move for Brøndby. So I could, if things go well, and he's a hard worker, I could see him progressing at the club, and they'd probably end up selling him for something like, well, maybe not quite a Kajusta sort of fee, but maybe 5 or 6 million at some point.
Yeah, he was also the subject of one of your Y Scout blogs, wasn't he, recently, Steve?
Yes, you know, he was obviously one of the players we profiled on Y Scout. He was one of the best players in the league, in the Norwegian league 2021, and he just dominated things in the middle of the park there for Viking. Great playmaker, but he does so many different things, and this will be interesting how he steps up at a club, you know, at the top end of Denmark. So I think he'll adapt absolutely fine, because he's just one of them players you just know. Honestly, I think his level is in English terms, I think it's top end of the Championship, bottom end of the Premier League. I would happily have taken him at Leeds.
It's a bit random, but I was actually watching a bit of Northland Brøndby from the weekend just gone, and yeah, he did stand out. I remember thinking that you had mentioned him. He stood out for his name in terms of the English passport. I think he's got part English heritage, hasn't he? And
yes, he does. Yeah.
Yeah. So he also stood out on the pitch. So good to hear. So final one then, Henry. I mean, just looking at the table at the moment, you know, before you reveal your final player, obviously you mentioned the top three. You got Aalborg as a fourth. Before you reveal your top three, I just wondered if you think any of the other. I know the league splits, doesn't it? So I don't know if you want to just give a very brief sort of overview of that, maybe 30 seconds or so. But I just wondered if any of the chasing pack in sort of the 5th, 6th, 7th places, they're not too far away, are they? Silkeborg, Randers. I just wondered if you thought any of them can break up further up the table and maybe challenge further up as the season ends, before you reveal your final. And also the other one thing I wanted to ask you is about Nordsjælland being so low in the table. Is that a bit of a surprise to you or not?
I'll try and take them in the order that I heard them there.
three in one, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So firstly, yes, the league splits in 4 games time, where you've got the championship group and the relegation group, and so at that point in time, the top 6 is locked in. You can't finish lower than 6th, and the bottom 6 is also locked in, so you can't finish higher than 7th. They do give that European playoff between the team in. I believe it's the team in 3rd this season, actually, against the top team from the relegation group, just so that there's that sort of carrot for them to play for. But then 2 teams are relegated from the relegation group. Top 2 get Champions League qualifying stage, and the Europa place goes to the cup winner. So third place nets you a Conference League spot. So there's lots to play for. In terms of the chasing pack, it's really tough to call. I mean, Randers went into the winter break looking pretty strong. They ended up selling their captain Erik Marksen to Nordsjælland, and that they lost to Leicester last week. Look, they lost tonight to Viborg, and so the wheels might be coming off there. I don't know. And it could be that one of Viborg or AGF managed to sort of nick a spot in that top six. But to be honest with you, with only 4 games left, I have a feeling that top six is probably locked in. The team that I think is going to be interesting to watch is Aalborg. I think that they've made some really great strides, across the window, but also going into the winter break. They sit in 4th at the moment, and I think that they could start knocking on the door of the top 3 if they progress. And interestingly, they've also picked up Viborg manager Lars Friis, who's going to be joining from the summer. He's probably been stylistically anyway one of the managers of the season in terms of what he's managed to put together at Viborg. So I can't see that the current top 4 being threatened at the moment, but I think there could be a lot of movement within that top 4. And the final question that you asked me about Nordsjælland, they were really, really poor so far this season. I think that they're the youngest team in the league by some distance, and sold their best player over the summer. And I think that they just sort of struggled with that inexperience. And if you look at the sort of names that they brought in over this window, it's really been trying to add some much needed experience. So bringing in Erik Marksen from Randers, they brought in a midfielder from Brentford on loan, Benjamin Nygren, right winger from Genk. So they've really gone hard in the market. I think they were the busiest team in terms of incomings, with I think 7 players in. So they're really trying to make sure that 6-point gap they have over the relegation zone is widened. But they lost to Brøndby at home yesterday. So things still look a bit bleak for them, but I can't see them being relegated. I think ultimately they've got too much quality, and I think that when the league splits, their fixtures are going to get a bit easier, and I think they'll stay up. But it's not been a vintage season for them.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Thanks a lot for that. And without further ado, your final game-changing transfer of this window.
Final pick, yeah. So I'm going for a guy called Mihailo Ivancevic, who's a Serbian under-19 international, 6'2" centre back who signed for Odense. And I didn't know a huge amount about him. One of the things that I love about watching the league is that the signings are often not household names. They're players that you need to get to know. And I was speaking to Ryan Winson, who's a scout for Odense, and he's really, really big on this player. He said that he really sees him playing in a top 5 league within a few years. He's a big centre half, but he can use both feet very well. He was already captaining his team, Spartak Subotica at 22. He's a very aggressive defender, which is always nice to watch. Strong in the tackles, but at the same time comfortable in possession. He can play out from the back. I know that's become a very important factor in the sort of modern centre back. And he's also deceptively quick for a player of his size. So I think that he's going to be a really interesting one to watch. I think that the Superliga's had a long tradition of producing very top class centre backs, and this could be the next one.
Love that. Yeah, that's a bit of a. I'm not sure too many people will know about this player, so it could be one to look out for. So, do you want to just recap your picks as we wrap it up?
Yeah. So, obviously, Jack Wilshere. It's going to be hard to avoid him. I think that there's going to be lots of eyes on him. So, yeah, Jack Wilshere at AGF. Max Meyer at FC Midtjylland, seeing if he can recapture some of that massive potential. Akinkunmi Amu at FC Copenhagen, along with Kuma Babacar, seeing if they can link up and start to put together some magic in that front three. Joe Bell at Bromby, who's already slotted in very well, but seeing if he can deliver on some of that potential that Steve talked about. And then finally, Mihailo Ivancevic at Odense, bringing some much needed defensive strength there, and yeah, watching the development of a prototype modern centre back.
Thank you so much, Henry. And where can we find you for anyone who isn't aware of you by now? You know, a vital addition to the team. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Football in DK, where I share any and everything that crosses my mind regarding the Danish Superliga. So yeah, come find me there, and we'll talk Danish football.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks so much, Henry, for the interview as well, and the insight into the game-changing transfers of this window in Denmark. So I think that'll wrap it up. We're gonna, in the next part of the show, we'll come back to Sweden and Norway. Henry, just before we let you go, I'm sure we'll have you back on the show very soon. But I just wondered if you had a prediction for the title, just what for anyone who's catching Denmark for the first time, maybe looking for a potential title pick. Do you have one word? 2-word answer.
Okay, but before the winter break, I was thinking it would be Midtjylland. But the way things have gone down, the signings, the recent round of results, I think that it's just nudged in favour of FC Copenhagen. So I'm going to go with them for the title. But it's really a shootout. But yeah, that's what I said at the beginning of the season. So I'm going to stick with it.
Nice one, Henry. Well, thanks again for coming on, and a great interview with Jordan. And we'll see you again very soon on the Nordic Football Podcast.
Thank you, guys. Keep doing your thing.
And that's it for this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. Appreciate you all. Thanks, Jonathan, Henry, and a big thanks to Jordan Gardner as well, our guest on this episode. Remember to check us out on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can follow me at Meatman Soccer on Twitter, and also Jonathan at JF Football. And of course, Football in DK, that's Henry's account. And if you want to follow our guest, is at Mr. Jordan Gardner. And we'll put that in the description below the episode. But until next time, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.